A few weeks ago, I was sitting in a session at a fitness conference. There were bosses in that room, decision makers, brand leaders, people with big budgets that can open doors. And I remember looking around and noticing the connections being made in real time. And the fitness and wellness professionals who would have absolutely benefited the most from being in that room were not there. And I kept thinking, gosh, they're at home posting, stressing about the algorithm, while the room where business gets done was sitting right here, half empty of the people who needed it most. And it's why I'm recording this episode today. I've got a whole lot to say, so let's talk about it. Welcome to the Sweat and Equity Show. I'm your host, Ari, and this show is where we have real conversations about what it takes to build, to grow, and scale a business in the fitness and wellness industry, to go from a creator or a practitioner to a founder, a CEO, and an operator. Today, I want to talk about something that I've been doing for years that has been one of the biggest drivers of my career and business growth that I believe is one of the most underrated strategies right now in the business period. It can help you increase your revenue, give you more opportunities, and open doors in ways that you couldn't even plan for. And no, it's not a funnel. It's not a content strategy. It's getting in the room, like physically being in spaces to network and to learn, in spaces where the right people are gathered and real conversations are happening. Because sometimes you walk into a room not knowing that the person you're about to meet is going to matter to a version of your business or you that doesn't even exist yet. So let's get into it. Now, before I get into the strategy, before I tell you how I think about being in these rooms, how I choose these rooms, how I move in them, I want to talk about why this conversation feels so right and urgent, like right now, because I don't think the timing is an accident. I think where we are as an industry right now is exactly why this matters. The digital landscape is exhausting right now, friends. You're posting, you're creating content, you're showing up consistently, you're doing what everyone says to do, and it's working, kind of. You're visible. People know who you are. Maybe your community is growing. Maybe your business is growing, but the bigger opportunities, the bigger brand deals, the corporate contracts, the dream clients, the support that actually can change the financial picture of your business, those feel a little farther away than they should. And if that's you right now, I want to encourage you to add some sauce to your marketing or visibility strategy, because here's what I've been seeing happening in this industry as of late, or last few years, honestly. As everything has moved online, as tools have gotten more accessible and the noise has gotten louder, a lot of fitness and wellness professionals have gone all the way into digital, which makes sense. That's where the advice is. That's where the big success stories you see are being told. But I've been in rooms recently where the conversations are happening at a level that I think a lot of fitness and wellness professionals don't even know are being had. People are talking about the future of fitness and what's actually trending in large group, small group, and personal training right now, and why the models that worked 5 years ago are being redefined. They're talking about retention strategies, marketing funnels, and content engines, and how to build something that actually lasts beyond trading time for money. They're talking about technology and AI. They're talking about the studio KPIs that actually matter if you run a studio, the metrics around people, process, and platforms, and how to use them to make smarter decisions in your business. These are not conversations happening in your Instagram feed, at least for our industry. They're happening in rooms. And in going all the way into digital, a lot of people in our industry have quietly walked away from what I believe the very spaces where the most important conversations are being had. I'm seeing a lot of people sleep on something this industry was literally built on: physical presence, real connection, in-person trust. That's legit the foundation of what we do in our industry. But somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that impact and scale meant moving everything online. But I actually think the opposite is happening right now. Hear me out on this. Because so much has moved to screens, the value of being in person has gone up. The value of being face to face has gone up. The value of being memorable in a room, of someone being able to feel your energy, hear your voice, understand your vision, and get excited about it real time has gone up. And the people who understand that are going to have leverage that content alone cannot create. And I'm not saying don't build online. Clearly, I'm about that digital life. I'm a content creator. I have this podcast. We're speaking online. I'm saying don't only build online. As you think about what your business looks like in 2026 and beyond, you have to be asking yourself, who needs to know me in person? What rooms do I need to be in? What spaces should I be showing up in where people can see me, hear me, feel my excitement for what I'm building, and decide if they want to be a part of it? The future of this industry belongs to the people who build smart online and show up powerfully in person, not one or the other. Both. And honestly, I've already been doing this for quite some time. When people look at what I've built, the partnerships, whether it's corporate, brand, the contracts, the opportunities, I think it's an easy assumption to make that I got that place with all of my content. And I get it, why people can think that. I show up consistently online. I create content. I have a presence online that reflects what I do and what I stand for. So yes, content has been bae. Content has played a role, a real one. And I'm not minimizing that. But if I'm being honest, a significant portion of generating 7 figures in revenue in my business in some way traces back to being in the room. It always traces back to being in the room, and not just any room, the right rooms, intentional rooms, rooms where I can build genuine and meaningful relationships, rooms where decision makers are hanging out, rooms where I can learn and grow. I don't solely rely on DMs, emails, or hoping that the right person sees my post to get opportunity. I've made it a priority since my corporate days, honestly, to always put myself in spaces where there's an opportunity to learn, to connect, to be remembered, and to have the kinds of conversations that just don't happen any other way. This is absolutely a marketing strategy too. And when I think about the high level marketing strategy that has worked for my growing business and brands, I'd say it's 2 things. And I call it my 2 C's: content and conversations. My content grows visibility. Conversations grow opportunity. Content is how people find me. It's how I built trust at scale. It's my introduction to people who don't know me yet. But conversations, on the other hand, conversations are where the relationship actually deepens, where someone goes from knowing who I am to truly understand what I'm building and what my goal and visions are, where trust gets created faster than any caption ever could, where someone feels my energy and my conviction about what I'm doing in this industry. Most of you have heard this reference as networking and being told you need to network more, but I refer to it as conversations because I personally feel networking has become one of those words that feels so transactional, so stiff, and just all about collecting context. For me, it's about quality over quantity. For me, it's about aiming for conversations in this space, which can start in the room and then end up digital. I think about collecting perspectives, collecting relationships, insight, access, trust, and proximity. Content introduces me. Conversations create the opportunity. And thinking about it this way has been a game changer for my business because the opportunities that have been, I'd say, the most significant in my business, the ones that took me to high 5-figure months, that opened real doors, that created the kind of partnerships I actually wanted. Those did not come from a DM. They came from being in a room, a real conversation, someone experiencing me in person and decided that they wanted to work together in some way, bring me into their company to speak, invest in my product offering, create an opportunity for me to be a brand ambassador. I wholeheartedly believe 1 hour having conversations in one room can do more than 5 hours on a screen making content. I'm just saying. I also believe that choosing not to be in rooms is very well costing you and your business. Let me paint a picture of what the cost of this bill actually looks like. Imagine the version of you 3 years from now who never got in the room, who keeps posting, kept showing up online, kept doing all the things digitally, but never invested in being physically present in spaces where decisions get made. That version of you has a ceiling. And the frustrating thing about that ceiling is that it's invisible. You won't always know why the brand deal went to someone else. You won't always know why the speaking opportunity never came. You won't always know why your network never opened the doors you needed. You just know that something isn't moving the way you want it. That invisible ceiling is proximity. And it is one of the most silent limiters of growth, I'd say, in this industry and others. I've been in rooms and watched it happen in real time. Brilliant, talented fitness and wellness professionals who've worked really hard, and their work can speak for itself. Nobody in that room knows who they are because they were never there. The people who got the opportunities weren't just the hardest workers. They were the most present. And so many of you are missing out. And speaking of missing out, this is a perfect segue into what I really wanted to call out in this episode after speaking and attending at different conferences and events in the past month. Your girl has been outside, because there were a few things that stood out to me that were just hard to ignore. One, there aren't as many people of my generation, millennials and even Gen Zs. There aren't many of us in these spaces that there could be. At the same time, these spaces aren't always designed or curated to attract our generation and the younger generation. So there's a clear gap between what I would say legacy leadership who want to share wisdom and the young operators building for the future of fitness and wellness. Two, there aren't always a lot of people who look like me as a woman, as a Black operator. Where we at, friends? Where we at? Three, the rooms I was in were actually very valuable, incredibly valuable. And I spoke about this on my Instagram stories and had some meaningful conversation that gave me more context into how people are feeling about this and why they aren't there. And what I realize is that a lot of people are counting themselves out of rooms that could genuinely take their business to the next level. They're counting themselves out because they assume the room is not for them, because they don't see representation or that they don't belong, because they feel like they need a bigger title first, more money first, more followers first, more credentials first. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that being one of very few or oftentimes only in a space doesn't stir a feeling up. It absolutely does. There are many rooms I've walked into where I am well aware that there aren't many women like me. There aren't many people who look like me, sound like me, come from the same background as me, or move through the industry the way I do. But I've also had to learn that choosing to opt out of these spaces is expensive, and have had to challenge myself honestly since the start of my career to shift my perspective of the value I'm actually bringing to these spaces, whether I see representation or check all the credential boxes or not. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, choosing to opt out of being in these spaces would have taken the biggest hit on my education and career. I would have never applied to Boston College, a predominantly white institution. I would have never applied to JB Morgan out of college to work in banking with a psychology degree. I would have never applied to work at JP Morgan simply knowing that it was a male-dominated industry. I would have never taken the leap to grow Jim Hookie and go all in because I had an HR background. I would have never climbed recently Mount Kilimanjaro because I didn't see Black people who are climbing mountains like that. I would have never showed up at industry events knowing I'll be the youngest one there. Are you getting what I'm putting down? I don't wait. I shift my perspective because the reality is I bring value to that room the moment I walk in. And that room is better because I'm in it. I bring things that nobody else in that room has. My perspective, my background, my way of seeing things, my difference. If I'm one of few, then that 100% means my perspective is rare in that room, and rare is valuable. If I'm not there, that perspective is simply missing. That's their loss. And I know that having this type of confidence and courage doesn't just pop up overnight, right? As I talk about it. So I want to call out something that I also know holds true, especially in some of the conversations I've had in my DMs. There are times when hearing people say a room doesn't feel like it's for them. And sometimes that is absolutely real. It is absolutely valid. I felt that too. But sometimes I'm going to keep it real here. It's fear. It's self-doubt. It's waiting for proof of belonging before you're willing to show up. And the truth is, most of these rooms are never going to come with a sign that says, yes, you belong here, boo. Come right in. That work is internal. Deciding you belong is not something a conference website is going to do for you. That is a conversation that you also have to have with yourself before you ever walk in the door. I've personally had to work through this as well. As a matter of fact, the more rooms I get access to, the higher up I go, the more I find myself needing to go back to that same reminder and instilling empowerment in myself saying, Ari, your leadership belongs here. Your creativity belongs here. Your lived experience belongs here. Your difference belong here. And when I walk into a room, having already had that conversation, I don't shrink. I don't apologize for being different or being there. I don't wait to be validated. I am present. I am grounded, and I am ready to learn, to grow, to meet people. I do not need to be successful to be in the room. I need to be in the room to become successful. And I think for a lot of people, that's the first room they actually need to enter, the one inside themselves where they decide they are worthy of the bigger rooms. Because if you don't settle that internally, every external room, I promise you, is going to feel harder than it has to. And listen, I don't want you missing out because you are sitting around waiting for whatever it is. Because while you're waiting to be fully ready, to be fully represented, to be fully confident, fully qualified, someone else is out there buying that ticket, showing up, making the connections, having the conversations, and making moves on their business goals. I have seen fitness professionals miss a conversation that would have completely change the game for how they think about their business. I have seen brilliant, talented coaches lose a brand partnership, not because they weren't the right fit, but because someone else was in the room and they weren't. So yes, you are actually missing out when you are not prioritizing being in these rooms. Don't underestimate it. You may be missing a conversation that clarifies your next move, an introduction to someone who knows exactly who you need to meet, a future client, a future collaborator, a future sponsor, a peer becomes a real friend and trusted thought partner, a room that normalizes the kind of success you are still treating like a fantasy because it's real. Every last one of these things has happened to me just because I was in the room. Corporate contracts and speaking engagements that started with a conversation at an event, consulting relationships that began because someone heard me speak on a panel and walked up to me afterward. Long-term brand partnerships that started with a handshake and an intro to the head of marketing, connections to people or resources that brought my business to a whole nother level. I quickly learned that your network can open doors that hard work alone cannot. Hard work is necessary. Trust me, I know this, but it's not sufficient. Hard work without proximity can keep you working in circles. Hard work without relationships can keep you isolated. Hard work without access can keep you overly dependent on just hoping to be discovered through content instead of being connected. Now, I've shared that I've made it a priority to be in rooms, but I'm not saying go to every conference, every summit, every meetup. That's not the vibes. You have to be strategic about where your time and money go. So while I'm searching for what rooms to be in, there are 3 core questions that I have top of mind that lets me know if it's worth my time and investment. First is, what season, Ari, are you actually in right now? Not in general, right now. For me, when I went to conferences I attended this past month, my intention was really specific. I wanted to share what I was building with Sweat and Equity and understand how to grow it beyond the podcast itself. So I was paying attention to sessions about content engines, social media platform growth, and marketing funnels. I was listening for what people were saying about scale and how to build something that doesn't require you to be everywhere all the time. I was also paying attention to things I can share with my audience, paying attention to what was being talked about in the industry, what trends were happening in training modalities, how people are thinking about large group versus small group versus personal training, what the metrics look like for businesses that are actually growing versus the ones that are stuck. That's the kind of intelligence you just cannot get from scrolling online. All of that shaped with sessions I attended, who I sought out, and what conversations I leaned into. The room has to match where you are, not where you were 6 months ago, not where you want to be in 2 years, right now. Second, who is likely to be in the room? And I just don't mean the speakers, although they're valuable too. I mean the attendees. Who is investing in being there? Who are the people making decisions, building interesting things, thinking at a level that could stretch me? Because sometimes the people sitting in the seat right next to you are just as valuable as the people who are on the stage. Third, will this room stretch me? I do not only want to be in rooms where I feel comfortable. I want to be in rooms that expand me, rooms that challenge what I thought was normal, rooms that raise my standards. If you are always the biggest dreamer in the room, it may be time to find a different room, because when you're surrounded by people who are already operating at the level you want to reach, their normal becomes your baseline. What they consider ordinary, the way they pursue opportunities, the standards they hold, becomes the new floor for what you think is possible. Osmosis is real. Proximity to excellence shifts you. And on the flip side, when you stay in the same environments far too long, where everybody thinks the same, that starts to shape you too. When you are in the right room, your ambition starts to sound normal. Your big ideas sound normal. Your standards rise because the room has a different standard. Sometimes that bruises your ego a little, not a bad thing. Sometimes it shows you where you've been thinking too small. Again, not a bad thing. That is growth. And speaking of growth, I do want to call out that growth and being in these rooms often has a price tag. Yes, I know conferences are not free. Travel and hotels are not free. And I don't want to act like the barrier isn't real because there's some of you it is. So I definitely want to share some quick thoughts here because not every room costs a flight and a hotel. Some of the most valuable spaces I've been in have been local, a dinner, a mastermind, a small event hosted by someone in my city. And one of the most underrated strategies for getting into rooms that you can't afford is serve your way in. Serve your way in, boo. Volunteer at the conference, offer to help with the event, reach out to the organizer and ask if there's a way to be involved. You can find them on LinkedIn. I've seen people get access to rooms that would have cost them thousands of dollars simply because they showed up and offered something. If you're a creator, that could be a good way for you to get in as well to produce content. That is the operator mindset, finding a way when the conventional path isn't available yet. I also want to note, I don't only go to fitness and wellness industry events. For a lot of my early years, the rooms I prioritized were full of women entrepreneurs in completely different industries. Business, finance, tech, law, media, because honestly, I felt like a lot of people in the fitness and wellness industry were doing the same things. And I always look for ways to bring my own sauce to whatever it is that I do. The way I've navigated corporate contracts is different from anyone I know in this space. Not because I'm more talented or smarter than anyone, but because I learned how to do it from people in other industries, in rooms where fitness professionals simply weren't present. Being in rooms outside of your industry is one of the fastest ways to develop leverage inside of it. Okay, I've been speaking about the value of being in these rooms, so I feel like I owe it to you to actually give you an example of one of many examples, actually, of how being in a room created incredible connection. So let's run it back to last year when I was attending the Connected Health and Fitness Summit for the very first time. I was invited to speak on a panel and was actually super excited to expand my network in the industry, across tech, across everything that was there. And one of the things I loved about this summit was that they had an app to help facilitate networking between attendees. And listen, if any event has an app where you can fill out a profile, I complete it always. And you should too. Profile pic, bio, interests, sessions I'm attending. Don't tempt me with a good networking time. But seriously, if I'm already attending to be in this room, I want to maximize that room, and filling out the app is a great way to do that. So I filled out the app. And because of that, I ended up connecting with a now really good friend of mine, Kathleen, who is the CEO and founder of Coach 360. She connected with me through the app and we set up a meeting to connect while we were both there. At the time, she was actually in the midst of building the Coach 360 platform, a career platform for fitness and wellness coaches. And because I was a coach myself and my profile made it clear what I cared about, she reached out and wanted to connect. We spoke. She shared her vision. She ran the concept by me. I gave her feedback. I shared what I was focusing on in my own business at that time. It was genuine. And it ended with me saying, hey, let me know if there's any way that I can support your launch. Simple. No grand strategy. No trying to figure out what I can get out of it. Just support and genuine excitement that we had a chance to connect, especially as women at this event, because it was predominantly men. And what came from that has been such a beautiful example of why I believe in being in the room and leading with generosity. When she launched Coach 360, I was a guest writer for a few articles. I've connected her with people in my network. And on the other side, she's introduced me to incredible people, been so supportive of all that I've been building in the last year and rooted for my work in ways that have genuinely mattered. And most recently, when I told her I was launching this podcast, she immediately introduced me to a YouTube strategist who used to work at YouTube and left to help creators grow on their platform. She said, you need to talk to David, made the introduction over email ASAP. David and I connected. He gave me feedback that has been incredibly helpful. And just a few weeks later, we got to meet in person at the Health and Fitness Association conference in San Diego. When he told me he was leading a session there, I was there, front row and center to support him. No questions asked. Kathleen led to David. David led to better decisions in how I'm thinking about editing and posting on my YouTube for this. And all of it traces back to a conference, an app, and a meeting that I intentionally made happen. But what I really want you to sit with is this. When I met Kathleen, Sweat and Equity didn't exist. It wasn't even a concept. I knew and somewhere in my future, I wanted to create a podcast one day, but I didn't know it was going to be this year, this show, this topic. That relationship was built before I even knew the future version of me would need it. That all came from one connection, one room, one app profile, one conversation, one willingness to show up. And that is exactly why I would always say, you never know. You never know who you're meeting. You never know what future version of your business they may support. You never know what opportunity or introduction might come months or even years later. That ROI of being in the room is not always immediate. And I can tell you firsthand, Kathleen is one of many examples. I'm going to tell you. Sometimes you leave with a clear next step. Sometimes with a connection that turns into something quickly. And sometimes you walk away with something that may be a little bit more quieter, a shift in perspective, a relationship still unfolding, a seed that will make so much sense later. And that still counts. In fact, that might be the most valuable thing of all. And I actually want to pull something out of that story with Kathleen that I think is easy to miss if you're just hearing it as a nice example of networking working out in my favor. Because there's something specific that Kathleen and I both did in that first conversation that I think made everything that followed possible. And it's something I see a lot of people skip all the time. We actually told each other what we were building. That's something I've been intentional about even as I've launched this podcast, as I've attended recent conferences and shared more about what I'm building with Sweat and Equity. People want to help, not because I had a perfect pitch, but because they could hear it. They could feel it. They could understand the bigger vision I have for this podcast and think about how they might be able to support or who they can connect me to. People cannot connect dots for you if they do not know what dots you are trying to connect. Too many people are building quietly and then feel frustrated that nobody's helping. But people can't help what they don't understand. They can't connect you if they don't know what you're focusing on. They can't refer you if they don't know what you're building. Period. You don't have to share every detail. You don't need to have everything figured out. But if you're in a room with smart, generous, connected people and you never actually say what you're building, you are actually making it harder than it needs to be for you to find support on your journey. So say the thing. Say what you're building. Say what you're excited about. Say what direction you're moving in. Talk about your goals. Give people something to work with. And I have to talk specifically about brand deals as I talk about this. One of the number one ways I've created not just one-off partnerships, but longer-term relationships is by being in the room in spaces where brand decision makers are actually present. The head of social, the head of influencer marketing, the CMO, someone connected to the person who's making the call. Who has the big budgets? When I'm in those spaces, the conversation goes so much deeper than I want you to post this content. It becomes, how do we get you involved in our brand long term? Could you consult with us on this? Could we bring you in as a speaker, a voice, a host, someone who can shape the strategy, not just execute the deliverable? These conversations happen more naturally in person because people get to experience my depth, my perspective beyond content. They get to understand how I think. They get to feel my presence and my joy. They get to see that I'm not just someone with followers. I'm a real brand, a real thinker, a real operator. And one of the reasons why I go to business-focused events specifically is because most people in our industry is not. Brands are there, friends. There is leverage in doing the things most people keep talking themselves out of. There's leverage in showing up in spaces that aren't saturated with the same people. There is leverage in being one of the few who decides to invest in proximity. I'm a creator who doesn't only go to creator events. That's what I'm going to say on that. Okay, now last thing I want to share with you are some of my tips for once you've made that decision that you are going to be in the room. Proud of you for that. The reality is working a room is a skill, and like any skill, it gets better the more you practice it. So I'm going to give you 7 of my favorite tips in hopes that it can help. 1, prepare, like actually prepare. Set an intention, not pressure, not this giant checklist of things to do. Just one clear answer to this question. What will make this event meaningful? That intention shapes everything, which sessions you attend, who you seek out, what you lean into. And make sure you look at the schedule. Who's speaking? What feels the most relevant to where you are right now? And if there's an app, this was coming, use it. Fill out the profile in advance, add your interests, make yourself discoverable, and see who's attending. 2, follow the energy, not the script. People can feel when you are running a playbook. They can feel when you are not really listening. Pay attention to what lights someone up when you're speaking with them. Follow the thread of what they're excited about and stay with it. People literally release dopamine and oxytocin when they talk about what they love. Their pace quickens in how they speak. They lean in, their eyes change. When you see that, stay there. Don't redirect because you have an agenda. That's where real connections happen. 3, remember that you belong there. I'm going to say it again. Remember you belong there, friend. Trust the work you've put in. Walk in like you already know they're going to be glad that you're there. Walk in with an open mind and a genuine presence. Don't try to be someone you're not. When you carry yourself with that energy, people rise to meet it. Most of connection is energetic permission that you give to yourself first. 4, don't self-deprecate your way out of your own authority. There's a version of humility that reads as charming. And then there's a version that quietly costs you your credibility. Oh, I'm just starting out. It's nothing really. I just got lucky. You might think that you're being relatable, but what you're telling people is to not take you seriously. And then they don't. You are allowed to own what you've built. Let people meet the most capable, the most dope, the most grounded version of you, because that's a version of you you're working to be. 5, move fast when there's a spark. If a conversation you're in feels aligned, don't let the moment pass. Say, let's set something up. I'd love to continue this, and get their contact before they walk away. An actual plan, not a vague let's connect sometime. That disappears the moment you both move on. Momentum is connection's best friend. The energy of that in-person moment is at its highest right now in the conversation. Use it. Get the email, put something on the calendar, connect with them on LinkedIn. 6, this one is for my introverts. Focus on presence, not performance. Some of the most memorable people in a room are not the loudest. I can tell you that firsthand. They are the most present. They ask a thoughtful question. They listen well. They make people feel seen. They follow up. That counts. Maybe for you, that means getting there early before the crowd. Maybe it means choosing 1 or 2 key sessions instead of trying to do everything. Maybe it means preparing a couple of simple questions so your mind doesn't go blank when you're in that conversation. One thing I've learned is that the more interested you are in another person, the more interesting you become to them. So if you don't know what to say, start there. What brought you there? What are you building right now? What has been the most exciting for you lately? You don't need to have the perfect line. You need to have presence. So be present. And lastly, follow up like a whole human, not a transaction. Reference something they actually said in your conversation. Send them a link, a thought, something relevant to what you may have talked about. Prove you were actually listening, not just networking. That kind of follow-up, I'm going to tell you, it works. It's so rare that it almost always gets a response. And that's how you turn a conference conversation, a summit conversation, a dinner conversation into a real relationship, and a real relationship into a real opportunity. So I hope those tips helped. Let me know how it goes and if you try it out. Now, as I close this out, I was sitting here thinking about what's one word I can leave with you that will be all encompassing of everything I just shared here. And the word that comes to mind is presence, because that's what all of this I feel like comes down to. Presence, not perfection, not a perfect pitch or perfectly timed follow-up, just a willingness to show up and be in the room physically, intentionally, and open to whatever the room has for you. Because you cannot always predict which conversation is going to change things. You cannot always tell which person is going to remember your name, open a door, or introduce you to the exact right someone 6 months from now. But if you are in the room, none But if you are not in the room, none of it can happen. The opportunities you are asking for to not only live online, a lot of them are in the rooms with real people having real conversations. And the only thing standing between you and those rooms is the decision to walk in it. So I want to leave you with this challenge. Find one event in the next 3 months, one conference, one summit, one mastermind, one retreat, something you haven't been to before, something that feels slightly outside of your comfort zone, and register for it, RSVP for it, pay for that ticket, show up with a clear intention, get to know the people in the room, and follow up like a whole human. Because some of the opportunities you are asking for are sitting in rooms you keep talking yourself out of entering. Your leadership, your creativity, and your ambition belong in that room. So step into it like you belong there, because you do. Thank you for being here for episode 4 of the Sweat and Equity Show. If this one hit, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it, and leave a review, subscribe. It generally helps this show reach more people in our industry who need it. I'll see you in the next episode. But more importantly, I'll see you in the room.